to see you all. I'm seeing some names in the chat box, so great to see. We're just going to get started in one more minute, giving people an opportunity to log on. Thanks everyone for telling us who you are and where you're from. It's so great to see. I see people from all over New York State, which is so nice. Okay, so we're going to get started now. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Grossman, and I direct the CBC Training Institute, and I am here with Dr. Max Banilivy today, and he is from WellLife Network, and we're going to be, Dr. Banilivy is going to be doing a presentation for us today on preventing burnout and building resilience. We really want to encourage you all to chat in the chat box if you have comments or questions. We want this to be interactive. And I am going to read some instructions on how to manage the webinar today. So you may notice that you've been automatically placed on mute when you joined the webinar in order to avoid the distracting background noises. You can't unmute yourself, but if you would like to ask a question, please write in the chat box. And please chat to everyone so we can all see it, all panelists and attendees. You should see the chat icon on the bottom of your screen, but if you don't see it, look on the right-hand side and click where there is a speech bubble, and the chat box should pop up on the right. If you experience any technical difficulties or issues with your connection with today's webinar, please chat to the host at the McSilver Institute, and our McSilver admin today will assist you. His name is Kevin, and he's here to support you with all of your technological needs today. Thank you, Kevin, for being here. We can go to the next slide, Kevin. So we are here today as the result of a wonderful grant by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. The grant is for us to provide training for mental health professionals on self-care, so needed during COVID and needed in general. So we're so lucky to have Dr. Banilivy here with us to talk about burnout today. We can go to the next slide. I just want to tell you a little bit about Coordinated Behavioral Care. We're a nonprofit dedicated to improving the quality of care for New Yorkers with serious mental illness, chronic health conditions, and substance use disorders. We have a large health home. We have an independent practice association, which has over 50 members. And basically, we as CBC support all of these members, all community mental health organizations, by doing things such as helping them with quality improvement projects. We provide training through the Training Institute. We provide billing support and so many other things to create a value add for our member agencies. We also have a preventative case management services. We have a really great program called Pathway Home. You may be familiar. And Pathway Home is a program where we do a lot of case management for folks who are coming out of state hospitals, coming out of Rikers and other prisons. And we also do preventative case management for those who are homeless. So we're so happy to have you all here. We're going to go to the next slide. Yes, so I am now going to turn this over to Dr. Banilivy. You are in for a treat today, and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you very much, Emily. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Kevin, for being our support this morning with technology. So we're going to be talking a little bit about, obviously, burnout and resilience, but most importantly, I want to also mention that it's good also to talk about stress, because we had it this morning with technology. So thanks to Emily and other people and Kevin, we were able to get this together. So we have a number of slides as well as number of videos. We're hoping that we can play it within the short time we have together. I am Max Banilivy from WellLife Network. Just to mention, WellLife Network is one of the larger, certainly if not one of the largest behavioral health agencies in New York City and Long Island. And again, thank you for participating in this training. To the extent possible, we'll try to make this interactive, even though it's Zoom, because that really the topic begs that, in a sense that it's really important to for us to have a conversation. And this is really will be a conversation about burnout and resilience to go forward and why it's so important. Kevin, could we go forward? Oh, we are there. So could we pull up the, so what we would like to do is to actually have everyone participate in a self-assessment on burnout. If we can have that slide up, please. Okay, everybody sees the link and you can click on it.
Yeah, and Dr. Banilivy, the link is in the chat box for folks. So if you click on the link in the chat box, that would be great.
Thank you. All right, as you see, you're going to receive this form. I found it very, very helpful. This is, so I will give you maybe a couple of minutes to just do this for yourself. And there's a scoring right on the bottom of this form, as you see. I don't know exactly how many people are participating, but I would be curious as to how many people will respond by saying that they feel like they're at risk of burnout or they are there already. So if you're ready, if you can put that in the chat room, please.
Dr. Banilivy, we have 89 people on the webinar right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Again, you'll have this form for yourself, and I like this form. It would be great for you to take this, and if you're at an agency and discuss a possibility of having staff take it, and for their own self-assessment. And it can be done confidentially, obviously. So we had someone already that said in the chat room that said that they were at more serious risk. I'll just wait a moment before I go forward and see if anybody else would like to share what their assessment was. If not, we can go forward to the next slide. Okay, somebody else said they're already there. All right, we have a brief video I want to share with you. If kindly look in your chat box and yeah, right.
Kevin, we're actually not hearing the sound.
So I was sitting in my cubicle today and I realized ever since I started working, every single day of my life has been worse than the day before it. So that means that every single day that you see me, that's on the worst day of my life. What about today? Is today the worst day of your life? Yeah. Wow, that's messed up. I'm sorry. Go on. Is there any way that you could sort of just zonk me out so that like I don't know that I'm at work in here? Could I come home and think that I've been fishing all day or something? That's really not what I do, Peter. However, Good news is, I think I want you to do something for me, Peter. I want you to try and relax. I want you to relax every muscle in your body, beginning with your toes to your fingertips.
All right, Kevin, we can just stop this.
I want you to relax.
Well, we wanted to show this as kind of an example of probably a lot of workers, a lot of front workers, a lot of staff feel just like that. They feel imprisoned. They feel like they are overwhelmed with a lot of the stresses, obviously, as Emily mentioned, in terms of really kind of as a result of us dealing with the pandemic for the last almost a year now, that the stress has built up for everyone. So burning out probably is not uncommon at this point. And people are responding and reacting and feeling it in a very different way, depending on who you are and what you're doing and what the circumstances of your life has been and how you've been affected. So Kevin, could we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So we would like to start by defining what burnout is about. Burnout is the result of a prolonged work-related and personal stress. It's a mix of exhaustion, cynicism, and ineffectiveness. So what are some of the signs? Exhaustion, even, certainly feeling tired, overwhelmed, feeling helpless, drained, as though your gas tank is empty, becoming more cynical about the outcome, about being more hopeful about the future, and also kind of questioning a lot of things in terms of what you have been doing. And the pressure and the stress certainly affects all of those. Feeling alone in the world is not uncommon, as you know, and probably from the literature, many of you, that we as a nation, we are experiencing more and more loneliness. So pandemic, because of isolation, social isolation, that has exacerbated that. That existed before, but pandemic just made it much worse. So symptoms of ineffectiveness, like lack of vision, motivation, not really motivating even to get out of the house if you are not working remotely, and also your productivity being reduced. You're not feeling as productive in terms of the kinds of things you want to do. Burnout victims get emotionally and physically exhausted. They stop caring sometimes. We become indifferent. And as it was mentioned before, become more cynical or negative. Their performance takes a dive. So it would be, if somebody's performance, particularly over the last year, has been reduced, it's not a bad question to ask about stress and whether they are taking on way too much for themselves. They even risk health problems like, as you know, heart disease very often affected by stress. Could we go to the next one, Kevin? So what might be some of the behavioral indicators that somebody may be at risk or may be burning out? Next slide. Behavioral indicators like somebody is critical, irritability, becoming impatient, lacking energy, as we said before, having difficulty with concentration, paying attention, not getting pleasure out of life and the things you have been doing and you used to get pleasure from before, and certainly self-medicating. We know for a fact the use of prescription and other drugs and alcohol significantly increased during the pandemic. Headaches and having physical symptoms is not unusual, as you know, with stress, whether it's a backache or stomach problems and other symptoms. Next, please.
I think that he did not mute. He has you muted.
Well,
people are saying they can't hear you.
I
can hear. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you just fine.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So what are some of the common stressors contributing to burnout that we can keep in mind? Let's go forward, please. Okay, common stressors are most often that are reported to be work. A very significant number of people in workforce report that their work is stressful. So we can imagine what has happened to that with the pandemic and all the changes and all the adjustments that workplaces and employees have had to make. Relationships are, again, one of the top sources of stress, certainly for those who are parents or parenting. That is another significant factor. Overscheduling, that means it's just the work and life type situation is all blended together, that it just, people have so much on their schedule that they do not have time for themselves. Certainly more pressure in some situations. We have had work agencies where they had to cut back on staff. So that as a consequence of that, less people have to do more work. So there's more pressure at work to produce, and in order to stay afloat, agencies have to remain open. And in order for that, they need to provide, they need to achieve and deliver a service. So if that's not done, they have to cut back. And some of the agencies, as you know, some people have gone under because they couldn't maintain. And a lot of people could not handle the pressure that came from work in particular, let alone worrying about their health and everything else. A lot of fears about all the changes that contributes to stress in general, and certainly social media. I don't have to mention to you and what it's like to listen to the news nowadays, and whether it's related to the storm coming, whether it's with the presidential issues, or whether there were other things. And certainly all the news that comes in saying, okay, this is not over, and it's not going to be over for a very long time, the pandemic. And that it wasn't that we had one virus, now we have variants of it coming that we're not sure exactly how to deal with. So social media at that level, and also at the personal level, hearing a lot of the tragedies has been, and can be certainly a source of support, but also has been a source of stress for many. Could we go forward, Kevin, please? So what events register highest on the stress meter? Before we go forward, I want to ask you, if you put in the chat, just what event do you consider highest on your stress meter? All right, thank you. So as you think about it for yourself, so what is Barbara? I just see what somebody's saying, and it's just the constant changes that create so much stress for us. So what are some of the typical stressors? Certainly it has been a tragedy. The number of deaths, number of people who are struggling to mourn the losses they have had, and thousands and thousands and perhaps millions of people who have not been able to grieve the way they were accustomed to, the way they wanted to. So death in the family, whether it was expected or not, is a very major stressor. Certainly divorce, just moving in general by itself is a stress. Loss of job or income. A lot of people had to quickly learn new jobs, new responsibilities at the workplace, let alone all the changes they had to make in their personal life in order to, most importantly, to keep safe. And just that, so, as you probably know, resulting in also loss of a lot of connections that served as support for most of us. So yes, we could be in touch with technology and phone and everything else, but it doesn't seem to take the place of those personal in-person connections. A lot of people have felt a decline in physical health, or they, you know, they have had problems with disability. Certainly, we have seen significant increase in the use of substances. So substance use and abuse across the board, as I mentioned before, has gone up dramatically. In fact, in the first 3 months of the pandemic, there were something like a 50 to 60% increase in the sale of alcoholic beverages. Certainly any natural disasters, earthquakes, otherwise, loss of a pet, which is obviously a significant companion for many people who live alone and otherwise. So let's go forward, please. So the one that is somewhat of an atypical high stressor, of course, is COVID-19 that all of us, we have been dealing with. And in many different contexts, I'm sure you have explored, whether within your workplace or individually, all of us have self-assessed and saying, okay, how have I dealt with this? Because this certainly was life-threatening, is life-threatening, and continues to be a major interrupter of life and our lifestyles. And I'm sure all of you have heard about the new realities everybody is trying to create for themselves. So as was mentioned in the chat room before, all these constant changes that for the organizations, for the staff and workers, and for the individuals at the personal level, they continue. It's a continuing contribution of stressors on top of us. So as we are going forward, looking at burnout, what we are having is this constant, uninterrupted stress about something that we have no control over. And COVID has become front and center for all of us because of the major interruptions and tragedies that it has caused. Could we go forward, please?
Dr. Banilivy, can I just jump in for 1 sec? I just want to let all participants know that unfortunately somehow the panel, the ability to chat to everyone is not in this webinar for some reason. It must have been a mistake. So I will do my best to read off what what participants are saying, if that's okay with you, Dr. Banilivy.
It will be absolutely perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks very much. So just quickly, what is the cycle of stress? I'm just going to show the next screen and just leave it on. It's self-explanatory for you to look at it, and then we go forward. So what is the cycle of stress? Next slide, please. We have always experienced stress, no? So stress is not uncommon. Stress is part of life. So the stressors have become more unusual, drastic. It's like the global warming, that we're having more of extreme weather. So this is another form of stress for us. It's how we deal with stress and how individual people, and again, I draw the parallel process between individuals and organizations and departments within the organizations. So it's a parallel process. It's the stresses of everyone, the workplace, individuals. How organizations and individuals deal with that stress is really what makes the difference, right? Whether it becomes a permanent situation, whether it becomes a constant stress that escalates, and whether it results in just feeling burned out, as we mentioned in the earlier slides, or for some people kind of shift gears. And if they somehow shift gears, which is what we kind of really are referring to as some degree of resilience, right? Some people are able to shift gears, even in spite of high stress, to be able to adjust, to go forward, consequently reducing their level of stress. Next slide, please. Which is another diagram or a chart for you to look at in terms of what stress could cause. Stressors, right? We react to stress and it causes wear and tear emotionally and to our physical condition. It reduces optimum health, certainly, and it hypersensitizes us, because that's our natural response to just when we experience stress, that our system goes on some sort of an alert as a way of coping. Let's go forward, please. So how do our bodies respond? So let's look at the other slide. The biological response to anything the brain perceives as a threat, okay? Like all biological processes, it has a beginning, middle, and an end. And if we can move all the way through the stress response cycle, we stay healthy. The problems begin when we get stuck and we focus on the stress, on the negativity, on the threats, rather than how we deal with those threats and all the negative news that comes in our direction, either internally or through the external sources, whether it's media or social media or otherwise. Let's go forward, please. So what are the physical results of chronic stress? Let's look at that very quickly. Certainly, weakened immune system, high blood pressure, obesity. People are talking about, what was the expression about the freshman 15 or whatever it was in terms of people going to college? Now people are talking about the pandemic, and it's become a cliche, and it's going to be part of the language going forward in terms of how people feel like they are putting on weight because their mobility is restricted. We don't go out as much. We don't go to other people as much. We don't go outside as much. And some people are even have fears of going outside and taking a walk. So a lot of illnesses that come as a result of, or at least they are exacerbated based on these health conditions, or they're exacerbated by distress. Next slide, please.
Dr. Banilivy, we have a question in the chat box.
Sure.
Any idea on how to do that moving forward when you have a busy schedule and so much demand placed on you?
Yes, I think we're going to get to that. I can answer it here, but if we're going to go to the end, and when we talk about resilience, if we don't, please remind me, and I will try to respond to it, if that's okay. Okay, thank you. So what could be an antidote to burnout? This is something Emily Grossman knows so well. She knows better than anybody else. Let's go forward. One of the antidotes is self-care, right? And she has developed a wonderful list that I've asked her previously to share with everyone. And it's a really wonderful list, and should be used as a living document so you can add on to it creatively as you go forward in your life, particularly during the time of pandemic, for you to go forward and put in all the different ways that you have been trying to adjust. Hint, hint, that the ways that we figure out how to adjust to these unpredictable events, and to all the uncertainties, all these things that we come up with as a way of coping. So in a sense, every single one of us who is here has coped in some way. That gets incorporated as permanently going forward as a way of coping with extreme situations. We don't have to discuss that pandemic is definitely classified as an extreme situation. So let's go forward, please. Just quickly. So what is self-care? Self-care is not about narcissism. I just want to make sure that sometimes it feels as though we're being selfish. Self-care is about being deliberate and taking time for the betterment of your mind, body, and soul. And it would be great for you to think about those three and see how you're taking care of each. Right now, in the middle of the pandemic, and certainly before and going forward. Self-care is not about being selfish. It's about replenishing and refreshing your spirit in a different way so you can maintain the level of productivity and well-being that you would like to have. Next, please. Self-care is the most important way to boost and maintain both emotional and physical health. Many people today neglect it due to lack of time. I remember the question that Emily read. It's just when so much is on your schedule, when you got 5,000 Zooms and meetings and otherwise to attend, how do we do this? So because we all say there's not enough time in the day to get done everything that I need to, not only at work, but also in my personal life. Because everything else that I was used to doing before, I may have to adjust it. The stores adjusted their hours, so I needed to adjust. I used to go shopping at 10 o'clock at night or 9:30. There were 24-hour places. They shortened their hours, so I needed to make adjustments, right? And this negatively impacts the lives of those who do not make sure they're putting themselves first. And I would like at this point to ask all of you, without thinking that this is about becoming selfish and ignoring others, which is not, is that it means, how do you attend to your physical and emotional and perhaps your spiritual well-being, that you can be there for yourself and also you can be there for others, whether it be significant others, kids, family, and also your co-workers in terms of going forward. Could we go to the next slide, please?
Dr. Banilivy, can I just jump in for 1 sec? We have a comment in the chat box.
Yes.
It says, it should not be, but I have seen managers make staff feel that it is wrong for them to want to take a day for themselves.
Yes. I think we discussed that on Monday on Back to Work. That was one of the things that we discussed when we had that. Please, it's going to be a recording that is going to be available to you through CBC. When it is available, you may want to look at those slides. You're absolutely right, because I think the managers and upper administration, senior administration, they have had to look at this piece, the emotional piece of it, and start the conversation if they didn't have this conversation before. In fact, those many managers and organizations where they did not directly attend to what has happened as a result of pandemic to their staff and frontline workers, they have suffered because they have lost employees. The employees have decided to resign. Employees that had to go take some time off due to emotional reasons as well as physical reasons. So it's a great question because attending, one of the things we discussed on Monday about going back to work was attending to the emotional needs of the employees is good for business. And that should be the focus for any manager. I'll be happy to discuss that further with you if I didn't at least attend to it a little bit at this point. Thank you for the question. Next, please. Self-care and resilience. We're going to shift a little bit now to take a look at, so we spend a little bit of time talking about self-care and what self-care is, And hopefully what is not about, ignoring other people and not being caring toward others. It's about taking care of yourself so you can be there for others as you wish to be and be as productive as you can be. So how is it related, perhaps, to resilience? Taking care of yourself, the American Psychological APA writes, helps to keep your mind and body primed to deal with the situations that require resilience. So let's go forward to the next one, please, Kevin. So from burnout to well-being. So we're going to kind of shift a little bit and focus more. And so we can go to the next slide, please. The resilience. What is the Webster Dictionary? I don't hear the Webster Dictionary anymore. I think it's on Google. I think they got rid of the old dictionaries. So resilience is an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. So we have been talking so far about some of the drastic changes, profound changes, tragic changes in people's lives by losing dear ones, unexpectedly, suddenly, not being able to say goodbye to them. So it has to do with bouncing back, right? So as we go forward, I would like to ask you, please think about, aside from pandemic, did you ever go through a hard time in your life? Did you go through a very challenging time, personally or professionally, at the workplace? And I want you to just pause and think about it. You are here, looking back. I want to ask you, how did you deal with it? If you care to, please put it in the chat in terms of that personal situation.
I'm seeing Eileen's on friends and family.
Okay.
Faith, spiritual community with support from family and friends.
Beautiful.
Ignore the changes, one person wrote.
Mm.
Start exercising more and getting to bed on time. Tai Chi, talk to others that were supportive. Not well, I ended up quitting my job. Speak with coworkers, deep breaths, so many deep breaths. Talking with family and friends, prayer, reading, gardening, found a hobby. I have to remind myself that it's not personal and I'm working for the Lord. Eat and drink. Humor, meditation. We get the idea, right?
Yes.
Lots of people writing about that. Thanks.
This is delightful. You know what brings up, and I asked this question because just listening to those, we see how creative we are. Look at all the different ways people coped, adjusted, or I hope most people felt like the adjustment was in the positive direction. Sometimes, in order to adjust and cope, we had to make more serious, most profound changes. But that shows the breadth of, wow, creativity and how many different ways we have of bouncing back. Kevin, could we go to the next one, please? So what is resilience? Psychologists define resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stressors. Does this summarize the pandemic well? It does. It had every single thing mentioned here is relevant to the pandemic. Because everyone has been affected by a few of them, and some people may have been affected with all of these elements. So obviously thinking about how do we personally how do we as an organization become more resilient would be a good question. This Could we go forward, Kevin, please?
I'm sorry, Dr. Banilivy, there's been a comment in the chat box that I think is very important.
Okay.
It has been shared that some supervisors are struggling with the concept of completing a required annual evaluation on staff during this time. I have suggested they look at this as an opportunity to highlight the strengths and not compare to previous years, but just to the surrealness of this year. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it was a perfect statement. I think one of the elements that any supervisor, manager, or senior administration wants, it wants the staff to be resilient and learning new ways of coping and addressing how people have coped and assessing the stress level from the employees and taking that into account in the evaluation process is a wonderful way to go forward in terms of incorporating that resiliency piece into the evaluation process. There is a lot of, you can certainly be in touch with me. Also, there is a lot of literature on that. It's how some organizations have incorporated that already in their competency evaluations on an annual basis or whatever time frame that you use as a way of feedback. This was an excellent point. Thank you. All right, next slide, please. So resilience is a dynamic process by which you overcome a stressful or traumatic event or events while maintaining relative normal functioning, right? Wouldn't you say most of the people have tried to maintain some level of functioning? That by itself, I'm going to ask you a question. Whatever you find your level of functioning to be, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think you're coping? 10 is best, most ideal, 1 is least. Ask yourself how you have been coping with the pandemic. If you just give it a thought, okay, the numbers are great. You know why? Because I see numbers 5, 6, 7, and 8. Why not lower? So I want to ask you, why isn't that number lower? What reason would you give yourself as to why the number is not lower? Yes, you're absolutely right. It has to do with resiliency. Saying to yourself, a mental message, I'm going to go through this. I have to do this. It's like the mornings you wake up and say, you really don't want to get out of bed. You say, I got to go to work, right? So we already have been resilient. And I think that just being mindful of it and thinking about yourself, your colleagues, your coworkers, frontline people, managers, supervisors, your organization, as you and your personal life, thinking about, let me think about this. Let me write this down on a piece of paper. How did I cope? This was awful. This was so drastic. This was something in my lifetime I'd never dealt with, but I'm still here. How do we do it?
I've got a lot of answers in the chat box. Do you want me to read them off or do
Yes, please.
Okay, I see discipline and deadlines, doing my best to push through because we are adaptive human beings. We got used to it. Able to change, focused on self-care, just knowing you are doing your best, that is it. You can only do so much each day. I love that one. Yes. I have made lemonade from lemons. I have to pay the bills. Important point. Trying to find meaning is the challenge, etc.
Beautiful. The one I see on my screen says learning to say no. Going back to the question that was raised before, about a supervisor, I think we can give ourselves permission to say to a supervisor that I'm having a hard time. And I think that's an important conversation to have. So senior administration need to make it their business to have this message go down the ladder to managers and supervisors and saying, we need to attend to that. And the other comment that was made here in the chat that was wonderful is that we said, we're all adaptable. One thing we know for sure, up to this point, we all have adapted in some way, identifying what has been right for us and identifying what is right for our community and what is right for our organization is what we need to do mindfully. So we say to everyone, you know, it was great to have dinner together. We never had dinner together. Now we're having dinner together every night. That was so great. We'll learn more things about each other. Somebody said in the chat before and said, hey, I started a new hobby. That was great. So our creativity as human beings comes out at times like this because we need to cope, adjust, and adapt to a new reality that everybody talks about. Kevin, could we go forward, please? Resilience as the ability to bounce back is related to inner resources, coping skill, and an ability to activate this psychological immunity, very much like the white blood cells. Let me ask you this. Do any of you take immune drops and vitamins? Does anybody do that? I wonder how many people are taking more of those preventive stuff during the pandemic than before.
Oh, we're getting lots of answers. People are taking emergency vitamins,
yes,
selenium and turmeric, on and on and on. Yes.
Elderberry is pretty good. It's bitter though. Okay. So we all have adjusted, right? But I think we need to think very much like child rearing, and what we need to do in raising kids is that we need to teach them to think about alternate solutions when we face challenging situations. Problems are a challenge. Adjustments and all the pressure and stressors are signs that tell us, well, I may need to adjust, make adjustments so I can deal with stress more effectively. So we do that with our bodies by taking vitamins and minerals and everything else. So why wouldn't we do that with ourselves mentally and emotionally? Right? Next, please, Kevin. Oh, great time to view a video, at least a part of, on resilience.
Why do some people do well despite serious hardships? The science of resilience can help us find answers.
We define resilience as a good outcome in the face of adversity. The extent to which we can build capacities in all children early in their lives to be able to deal with whatever bumps in the road or major obstacles may be coming down the track. That's an investment in building strong human capital and healthy, productive adults.
Some children face more obstacles and adversity than others.
Like having a parent with a major mental illness, growing up in a very socioeconomically disadvantaged community, going to schools that are not good, being exposed to violence in the neighborhood or in the home.
But some children do well despite these significant obstacles.
Resilience is that ability or set of capacities or positive adaptation, allowing you to keep in balance.
We're talking about the kinds of capacities and skills and the abilities that give people a sense of mastery and management of difficulty.
It's tempting to think about children as either having this resilient quality or not, but resilience is built over time, just as and in parallel with how the architecture of the brain is built over time.
It's not just in the person. It's in the interaction between the person and the environment.
So we care about resilience for the same reason that we care about promoting healthy development, because in many respects, it is the same.
Thank you, Kevin. Could we stop that?
Resilience.
Thanks. All right. So certainly we are different. Some of us more resilient than others, naturally. People go through god-awful situations, sadly enough, in their earlier life, and they blossom, do wonderful things with their lives. And one of the things that was said on the video was that we need to always find a balance for ourselves. And I'm referring to not just the physical balance of things, but emotional balance. So stressors, tragedies, and everything else just throw us off. Is getting back on track and creating a balance. And maybe what is happening is that this has been more drastic. So we need to spend a little bit more time in terms of creating that emotional balance for us to go forward. So it is built over time. And some people, it may be that this tragic pandemic is that push the button of some of us more than others. Some people who had more adaptive coping skills, maybe they did better, but this was drastic. Those even the most able to adjust, they may have been affected very seriously. They may have in some ways reduced their footing to some extent, but it's possible those people will bounce back a little bit faster. And one of the comments that was made is that sometimes after a while you get used to something that is adverse and in negative, and you go forward and say, okay, it is what it is. I need to go forward. And you gradually kind of put that in the past for yourself. So what are some of the components of resilience? Next slide, please. This is the diagram just for you. You can make note. It's going to be in the PowerPoint that you're going to be getting for you to look at. What are the 6 domains? You see health clearly, right? Certain tenacity, social network, context, having a goal, looking at a goal, looking at an achievable goal, some things that I can do rather than the things I cannot do anymore, right? So just on one slide, so you see some of the components. So let's go forward, please. So let's look at it a little bit more deeply. Next slide. So resilience, about neural mechanisms that underlie resilience are extremely complex. We don't really understand it fully. We're just started in the last couple of decades to look at it even more and more, but includes a lot of these components. Next slide, please. So aside from what we were discussing, so what are the things that lower resistance or what lower the resistance factor? Chronic stress, which is what we're dealing with. Being in that state of fight or flight, right? That creates a sympathetic nervous system. It creates a hypersensitivity. We're more alert than before. Aren't we all more alert about what we touch and how often we wash our hands, right? Not standing close to others, especially if they're coughing. What happens if a coworker that comes to work and says, oh, I had COVID, I was away for a couple of weeks? Would we be sensitive about being next to that person? Next slide, please. So let's go over another video, a brief video.
I want to tell you a little bit about your nervous system and how that works. And I want to use a metaphor, which I call the bucket of resilience. Now, when you start developing as a fetus inside the belly of your mother, already after 22 to 26 weeks, you can be conditioned. And you have a nervous system. You don't have cognition yet and everything, but you can tell light and darkness and sounds, and you can notice your mom's nervous system alert levels. So what you have is like a bucket, the same kind of bucket that you would use to collect rainwater, or the one you would have in a boat if it starts raining and you want the water, to go out of the boat. So this is your bucket of resilience, and stress in any shape or form is like rain filling that bucket. Now, as the bucket fills up, your stress levels rise. Your resilience is the distance from where your stress level is right now up to the top. Stress levels go up in a day for different reasons. It could be good, it could be bad, it just goes up. The idea is that at night, when you sleep, the bucket is empty. So a good night's sleep will lower your stress levels so you wake up fine and preserved. If you have a bad night's sleep and you don't get the rest you need, you will wake up with your bucket full to 1/3 or maybe half full. Maybe you sleep in a way that your bucket never really empties. That means you have a base tension, which is that. All right. So as the bucket fills up with stress, what will happen is that when you come really close to overflowing, you'll start noticing that your bucket is full because your resilience is less. You will react to things that normally don't disturb you a little bit more than the situation calls for. You spill coffee on your pants, you don't go, spilled some coffee on my pants. You go, I spilled coffee on my pants, and it's somebody else's fault. That's what happens up here. Also, you start getting physical symptoms because it's been filled for a while. You start getting headaches. You start getting indigestion. Your nervous system is fired up. Now, when your bucket fills over the sides, that's when you can have a panic reaction, or you could go into apathy. You wake up in the morning and you can't get out of bed. You're just lying there thinking, I should get out, but I can't. That is a fight and flight response. It's a freeze response that kicks in because your bucket is full. Your system says, don't do anything, don't move, don't even think about it until we get this bucket empty. Now, this is the everyday stress that can fill up, and reasons why it doesn't empty could be that the stress is bigger than your relaxation, or that when you sleep, you're actually not rejuvenating properly. But there's another fact that can fill the bucket really fast and works in a different way. This is when something happens, anything that fills your bucket all the way up in an instant. That kind of experience is called traumatic. Now, if your bucket is empty, a traumatic experience is quite big. It takes a lot to perturb you. But if your bucket is half full, a smaller experience could fill it all so that it overflows. Traumatic experience is an experience where something of value to you, your integrity, your safety, your personal, your prestige, something is at risk of being lost. Also, there is no escape. Also, no escape can be something you perceive. It doesn't have to be for real. Now, we have a lovely nervous system and it's there to protect us. There's nothing wrong with what happens next, but it does create some issues. Because if there's a traumatic experience, let's say already in the belly of your mother walks out into the street and a car goes, meep. She gets really agitated and jumps up on the sidewalk. Her nervous system goes boom, 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 boom. Inside, the fetus registers noise, meep, life danger, right? So that noise is registered into your nervous system as a button. And that button is there to save your life once you're born. The way it works is, this is a conditioning that is potentiated into your nervous system in the amygdala. Now, the mother maybe realizes, but it wasn't so bad, and walks on and forgets about it. But the child is born, and at a later point in life, at around 10 years maybe, the child walks out into the street, everything has been fine, and all of a sudden, a car honks with that exact same noise going, meep. And all of a sudden, the child gets really scared and cold, sweaty, and heart starts beating and thinks, my God, I'm having a panic reaction for nothing. I must be broken. No, it's a conditioning that was made prenatally. And I'm saying this just so you understand that conditioning can happen from week 22 to 26, and then it goes on the rest of your life. That experience in itself can be a new traumatic experience. And everything that happens when we have a traumatic experience gets these buttons. They're called triggers, right? So the triggers are coded in our senses. One trigger could be noise. It could be smell. It could be visual information. And that information is coded in 3 categories, right? So category 1, immediately recognizable threats, right? If you see a big dog coming towards you, immediately recognizable threat if it's a threatening dog. So the visual of a big threatening dog is coded as one button. And that's one category of information, coded in all senses, the smell, the look, the feel, the sound. But then there are 2 other categories of information, and this is why it's good to understand. It's also coded stuff that just happened to be around at the time. There was a big dog, and it was midday, and the sun was shining. And I could clearly smell the green grass. This information is co-coded. And then there's a 3rd kind of information, which is there were no people around me. The context, it was outdoor, it was indoor. So specific information and general information and threatening information. Now, the nervous system codes this so that when enough of these are checked off in the future by your sub-radar, subconscious nervous system, it will trigger a life and death reaction similar to the one that you experienced before. That's called post-traumatic stress. And post-traumatic stress can listen just to your imagination. So if you smell the grass, have the same sun, there's no people, and you imagine there's a dog, your nervous system will act as if that was a real truth, not a fantasy, which means that it's a conditioned reaction to certain stimuli that will trigger a traumatic response, but you may have no idea what it's about because there was no dog around. Now, the reason this is good to understand is that what can be conditioned can be deconditioned, right? So when you decondition something in the nervous system or depotentiate, it means that if you activate the circuits of this checklist, the checklist going dogs, including grass, including sun, including no people, including a sound, if you can calm the nervous system down while this circuit is active, it's basically like an alarm in a car that starts and triggers for reasons you don't know, and then you just fine-tune it until it turns off, which means you can notice all these things, but the emotional response doesn't happen anymore. Then you've depotentiated the traumatic reaction, and it won't trigger anymore. And basically...
Kevin, could we stop in the interest of time? This is a little bit longer, but the great thing about this particular video is, as I mentioned before, that we all come to this point with a history. And
Dr. Banilivy, people are asking for the name of the guy or the link for that video.
yes.
I'm wondering if maybe Kevin can post the link in the chat to everyone so that people can
we'll get it before the end. We'll try to find it and get it to.
Okay, Kevin just chatted out the YouTube.
Beautiful. Okay.
Thanks, Kevin.
I assume people liked it because it's simple and it's true. So one of the things we were mentioning is that not only that we all cope and adjust differently, we all have responded to the pandemic differently. Thank you, Kevin. This is great, this slide. So, so we all have adjusted differently because of our history. So as colleagues, as coworkers, as managers, we need to keep in mind that we all of us, we have a different history that is going to respond very differently to this pandemic. But also, as a way of balancing back, depending on how we have coped in the past, our resiliency factor will be higher. That means we'll bounce quicker. We'll have a reference point. We have a list of things that we have done in the past in our lives where it was helpful to us. That's why it's important to ask that question, to say, okay, this helped before. Do you think it's going to help again? Or do you need to tweak that to adjust it to the new situation that is ongoing? One of the things that people say over and over again about the pandemic is causing burnout is the fact that it's relentless. You get good news about the vaccine, but it comes with a whole bunch of other negative news that with it. And it comes with the variant and so on. So we're constantly bombarded. So at this point, we can start formulating and thinking about, okay, what's the difference between me and somebody who really has handled this well? What's the difference between us? So just kind of asking that question of us. So in terms of going forward, so this may be a picture that is relevant for a lot of people. Some people, they feel like their life has been an uphill battle, a struggle. So what is the difference between this person, the person that takes that boulder or rock up that hill and goes back and forth, slides back and goes to the top and says, I did it. And I did it because I didn't give up. And the other person who may still do that, some people may give up anywhere on this incline. And there may be a person that just gets up there and says, I never want to do this again. This is the last time that I'm going to do anything like this. So rather than focusing on a resource that's going to be developed internally, the person is looking at it as though it's a very negative experience and they're going to change their life maybe, right? And some people do that because that experience was awful because I needed to work on things incrementally, gradually, slowly, break it down because I have too much on my plate. I'm overwhelmed. And this is definitely an overwhelming situation. I'm looking at it, I'm scared. What happens if I lose footing and the boulder will, crush me? I could think like that, but I was thinking about that flag on top, the white flag. That would be so nice and exciting to get to the top. Next, please, Kevin. How do we develop resilience? Next. Early life is an effect on resilience. Stressful experience during early life negatively affect development. Severe stressful experiences encountered in childhood negatively affect vulnerability or resilience. So we can go left or right. When we experience bad things, when we experience trauma, when you experience those overwhelming feelings, the gentleman was talking about feeling panic. When bad things happen, it's like what somebody said in the chat room. You got lemons, you make lemonade, right? As the expression goes. I have a couple of boxes on my screen. Oh, thank you. So I got examples of some of the toxic stressors, including what has happened with the pandemic. Next, please. So let me ask you this before we go forward. Based on the video, based on our conversation so far, would you say resilience is something that almost everyone can learn if they want to? If you can just quickly respond in the chat.
I'm seeing a lot of yeses.
Wonderful.
Sure, yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So if we go, think about that. If we collectively go forward with our families, significant others, friends, and at the workplace with our colleagues and organizations and say, we can become more resilient. What do we need to do to become more resilient? Because we can avoid becoming overwhelmed because things are happening. Life happens, right? As we know. But if we say we can become more resilient or more resilient than before, then it's a nice starting point. It's a nice conversation to start at work. We can do better. We can improve this. We can overcome this. So let's go forward, Kevin, please. So how about those more resilient individuals? They can roll with the punches, as the expression goes. And they seem to be handling life's ups and downs with ease, at least on the surface, right? This is a trait that can be improved upon, but individuals are unique in their sensitivity and obviously in their temperament and personality style. One of the things we say with regard to trauma, traumas could be traumatic, but do not have to traumatize us forever. And trauma is something that we can grow with rather than be stagnated with. Next, please. This is the diagram is going to be there. It says the impact of excessive trauma and chronic stress in terms of lowering resilience. Let's go over. Let's go on, please, Kevin. And all of you know about the adverse childhood experiences. I'm not going to spend too much on because this is just really an example of when people go through traumatic experiences. All of you are familiar with the ACEs scale, that 10-point scale. I assume most of you are. If not, we can certainly send you that information. Yes, I think I'm getting a lot of yeses. So let's go forward, Kevin. And resilience is just, let's watch a little bit of this, only a couple of minutes.
the mid-90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or packaging chemical. It's childhood trauma. Okay, what kind of trauma am I talking about here? I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game. I am talking about threats that are so severe or pervasive that they literally get under our skin and change our physiology. Things like abuse or neglect, or growing up with a parent who struggles with mental illness or substance dependence. Now, for a long time, I viewed these things in the way I was trained to view them, either as a social problem, refer to social services, or as a mental health problem, refer to mental health services. And then something happened to make me rethink my entire approach. When I finished my residency, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work for California Pacific Medical Center, one of the best private hospitals in Northern California. And together, we opened a clinic in Bayview, Hunters Point, one of the poorest, most underserved neighborhoods in San Francisco. Now, prior to that point, there had been only one pediatrician in all of Bayview to serve more than 10,000 children. So we hung a shingle and we were able to provide top quality care regardless of ability to pay. It was so cool. We targeted the typical health disparities, access to care, immunization.
Kevin, could we stop this? I just wanted folks to listen. This is a great video to watch because it really kind of covers ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, quite well. And for a couple of people who said they were not familiar with it, that's a really good start for you. And it's very simple and clear to follow. Next slide, please. And yes, you can quickly glance. A lot of these you know already, right? I see in the chat about where we can find it. We're going to make sure you get the information. Next, Kevin. And we basically covered, the video covered some of these, right? But I want to show you the 6 core pieces in terms of going forward. Next slide. Let's see if it's there. I think biological effects. And the next slide. Okay, let's. I think we was covered before, so let's spend just a couple of minutes in the time we have left to talk about improving resilience. So next slide, please. We can learn and teach resilience despite the many intricacies involved in, as we talked about, in terms of all the nuances of development, genetics, and different life experiences that people have had. Next, please. 3 secrets to resilience. Resilient people exhibit these. Do you remember that all the books and TED Talks about the characteristics of the most successful people? This is the characteristics of some of the more resilient people. They say to themselves, suffering is a part of life. They realize this. Choosing where to put your attention carefully, turning into good things finding benefits, saying every experience, regardless of how bad it is an opportunity to learn and fortify. So, and also, what am I grateful for? And most importantly, they asking, is this helping or harming me by doing this? By the way I'm thinking. Next, Kevin, please. Oh, we have about 6 or 7 minutes left. So let's watch just a minute or two of this.
Imagine a day you felt very sad, and try to bring that day back into the top of your mind and try to grasp how you exactly felt that day, why you felt sad, and for how long you felt sad. Did it last for hours or days or even weeks? Every one of us here, without exception, has experienced such a day, and likely many more saddening days like this. When we try to locate that sadness, we immediately reach to our heart, the organ that makes our blood flow through the body. But when speaking about sadness, you would rather point to another organ, the brain. This is the place for our thoughts, our feelings, our goals in life. When we fall in love, we always think in terms of the heart, but the love we cherish is in our brain. It's much the same when after a major setback, we are feeling sad. It's our brain that is feeling sad. Our intentions, our dreams, our motivations, us all being here together this afternoon, it's all here in the brain. Sometimes we are limited by our brain. All of us, all our brains can become strained when we experience stress at work or argue with our loved ones. Too often, people burn out, feel depressed, experience anxiety. More and more people are becoming addicts. As a scientist, I really like to create a bridge between science and people, and science and society, and I feel challenged to create new ways to solve these conditions. The World Health Organization predicts that by 2020, depression will be the most common illness in the Western world, even above heart failure.
Kevin, would you stop? Thank you. Thank you very much. This is maybe you want to maybe also watch this particular one because it really kind of reframes things. And in terms of empowers people, that those are in terms of dealing with our emotions, that the way we think about things also makes a difference. There is no question that what happened to the towers, World Trade Center, what happened during the pandemic was tragic, and also it was powerful, very strong emotional reaction on part of everyone. And I think it's a good video to watch. Kevin, could we go forward? We have about 3 more minutes. I want to just, how do we improve resilience? So we'll just mention improving the resilience, just 5 simple steps. Again, this will be in your PowerPoint, so you don't have to write it down, okay? And the 5th one is one to say, what do you mean accepting and even welcoming stress? We become more resilient over time with increased challenges, if we look at it that way. Next, Kevin. Another way of putting it is that we can improve our resilience by having certain core meanings in our life that will look at everything and challenges in that context. For instance, somebody who is spiritually says, well, challenges are always there in life. So I'm going to be focused on what I think is the meaning of life altogether. This was a big bump in the road. There's no question. And still continuing. This big bump, I feel like I'm still on that incline, trying to maintain to go forward. Next, please. Improving resilience by social connections, by our attitude, our values, how we handle our emotions, and yes, silliness. That means make sure you laugh. Make sure you watch something funny. One of those belly laughs. Next, please. Let's skip this, Kevin. We're almost out of time. And this is another model. We have talked about this. It's going to be in your PowerPoint. This simple five elements to keep in mind. Next. Again, building resilience. So I'm hoping as we have gone along, we've seen, okay, stress builds up. We can't get very close to burning out. But on this end of it, in terms of balancing, we can work on things. We can, by the way we look at challenges, where the resilience can counterbalance the possibilities of burning out. Next, Kevin. And we talked about this before. Let's go forward, please. And there are a couple of things quickly, just show those two slides. One is about workplace stress and building resilience. And next. Go forward, please. And some of these we already talked about. Next. Next, please. I'm just going to show this about 5-10 seconds so you can look at it. Again, all of it is going to be in your PowerPoint that you will have, they will post. Next. And there are different models. APA, American Psychological Association, has a model for resilience. I would suggest that you take a look at it, and certainly there's 10 steps by themselves may be enough to go forward, counterbalance, the possibilities of burning out. Next. MRT, that's the Army. Next, please. If you're interested in that, again, there will be references. Next, please. Next. And it really talks about managing things on a small step basis, breaking down things, even breaking down all the stressors that we have in our lives and focusing on one at a time. That applies to organizations also. Next, please. All right, next. And this is the last item. I would like you to all walk away with an action plan to reduce. If you said, oh, you were close, almost there, or you're already burned out, I would like you first, please, state 5 things to avoid burnout for yourself. And then please put a check mark next to the item you intend to actually start with. This is all about actionable things, right? So once you do that for yourself, think of a coworker or a staff member whom you believe may be experiencing burnout, right? How and what would you do or say to help a person reduce burnout? It is so important. This is called parallel process. What I'm doing with you is what I'm hoping you do with yourself, your family, significant others, and your coworkers, supervisors, and managers. Use this to go forward, but you need to make it actionable. That means you need to implement it. Use it as a way of writing things down and seeing it with your naked eyes. It's so powerful. This is what I'm worried about. I heard an expression not too long ago. It says the thing that you think about the most controls your life. So think about the thing that you think about the most. Identify it and see how it's controlling your life and how you want to maybe change it to avoid burnout. I hope, thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to ask if Emily doesn't mind to have my email in the chat, or I would appreciate it. And any questions?
Yeah, Dr. Banilivy, if you would type your email address in the chat box because we don't have it.
Oh, okay.
That would be the best thing, I think. I want to thank you so much for this wonderful and very informative presentation. For those of you who are looking for CEUs, we are providing them only for social workers and licensed mental health counselors. We did post the form to fill out in the chat box, but I'll have Kevin post that one more time, Kevin. And also, if you have questions about CEUs, I'm going to put the CEU email address in the chat box. It's ceus@cbcare.org. We'd be happy to field your questions about CEUs. And I will post the PowerPoint and the video recording and all of that to the CBC website. I've posted the link to that a few times. Let me see if I can paste that one more time. Yes, there you go. So check back next week. We'll have it up.
Emily, can I say one last thing?
Of course, please.
It's for those who are going to apply. It is so essential that the form is completed in full and everything is printed, because all the license numbers and names, please print your name the way it is on your license, because these all have to be, according to New York State, we need to check all of these before we can issue a CEU.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's a type-in form, so people will type it all in.
Thank you very much, Kevin, also. He has been wonderful.
Yes, and thank you so much to Kevin, for sure, for helping us. You'll see Dr. Banilivy's email right below. And if you have any other questions, please email us at ceus@cbcare.org. And thank you so much for being here today, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Dr. Banilivy. And just so you know, we're going to be emailing out the CEU form as well to folks who have attended today, just in case you weren't able to fill it out now. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here today.